Hi, this is Josh Kulp. This is the video for Daf Shevui of Masechet Ketubot, Daf Samekh Gimmel, page 63. And I'm going to address here the story that appears in the first half of this daf, which is probably the most famous fairy tale, I would say, in entire Jewish lore. And that's, of course, the story of Rabbi Akiva and his wife, who really isn't named in this story. She's just called the daughter of Kalba Savua. In other places, she's called Rachel. It might be alluded to in the end in the next story about Rabbi Akiva's son. But I want to talk about the story and how it functions in people's lives, and really to show maybe a darker side of the story. The story is really the fairy tale, I would say, of every Jewish scholar. And what do I mean by the fairy tale? Everything good here happens to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva sees this beautiful woman, or somehow he sees this daughter. We don't really know what she looks like. In other places, we do know here that she is beautiful, but we can imagine he's just a simple, humble shepherd with really no attributes. And that's a fantasy of many men, and probably many women as well, a fantasy that somebody else will see inside you. He's just a humble shepherd. But inside, he's what they call tzania umale. He's modest and good. And she sees through his external acts and the fact that he's a shepherd, which is a lowly profession, and she sees into him. She sees things that other people don't see. She denies her father. Her father says, no, you can't get married to him, and she goes and marries him in private where no one knows about it, and she gets kicked out of her father's house. The story begins with a terrible beginning where she's removed from her father's house, but she suffers. She says, look, I want you to go learn for 12 years. That was the condition of the betrothal, and she suffers for those 12 years. We learn about her suffering where that old woman who performs an important function of letting us know what's going on with this daughter of Kalba Savua, wife of Rabbi Akiva. How long will you be a widow in life? Right? How long will you suffer the absence of your husband? And she says, he's doing it all with my permission. If it was up to me, I would let him go for another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva, I think acting somewhat insensitively, goes and does that. And he goes and learns for another 12 years until he becomes literally the greatest scholar, I think, perhaps, that the Jewish people has ever known. He comes home. She comes out, and she comes out dressed in rags, and her friends say to her, look, put on better clothing so at least you can make some kind of impression. And she says, my husband will see what kind of a behemoth, literally what kind of an animal I am, and he'll know his animal, which is a very poignant line, I think. Again, she falls down on her face. She kisses his feet. Right? He recognizes her, and he, in return, gives to her credit for everything that he's become. The father breaks the vow, and they end up rich in the end. And all is very happy. But really, I want to talk for a minute about how dangerous this ideal can be. And I think even the rabbis acknowledge how dangerous this story can be. She survives the ordeal of being away from her husband for 24 years. Rabbi Akiva survives, and they have a happy ending. But can every woman, every Jewish woman, live up to this standard? Can every Jewish family live up to this standard? Rabbi Akiva's wife is held as the standard of Jewish femininity, of what it means to be a Jewish wife in Haredi society to this day. And I think you can make a good argument that a lot of Haredi women suffer because of it. Their husbands go off to learn and are not there for them. They do not support them. And their wives have to financially support this lifestyle of a man learning Torah. I think that this is a new invention, something that did not exist, let's say, over 100 years ago. But the idea that this story should be a role model for everyone is really not there in the cycle of stories as well. because after all, we saw that for the first few stories, when a woman and a husband tried to do such a thing, it ended in death and it ended in barrenness. In the last story that we get on this page, it ends in a fight. And only very, very unusual, unique, I would say, perhaps once in the history of the world, type of people can live with such an arrangement. And I don't think it was meant to be something that everybody should follow in their daily lives. It was meant to be one of these stories that's an ideal of, let's say, bravery, heroism, dedication, but not something that normal people should try to achieve. And we have to be careful when we tell stories such as these. We have to be careful because people in the real world try to live up to these stories. People in the real world try to force other people, perhaps even worse, force other people to try to live up to these stories. Haredi society has made women try to live up to these stories for many, many years. They may even be making men try to live up to these stories. Men can't all take such absences from their wives. It leads to all sorts of social problems, things that are a phenomenon that can be considered very undesirable and cause a lot of psychological pain. So while the story has a happy ending and presents this idealized world, I think we have to look very critically at what it can do to actual people's lives and ask ourselves a question: is this a story that we should celebrate, but is it also a story that we should perceive as being potentially very dangerous?